Hello, hello, hello. Time to rant again. Today I want to talk about masculinity or lack thereof. Masculinity, femininity, I guess the role of men and the role of women, and how it feels like it's completely flipped now. I'll just start with myself. Kind of like what I shared about this journey about speaking truth and trying to be more authentic, trying to get out of that mode of having my mind and my emotions being disconnected from each other, being more real. One element of that has been embracing masculinity, or a sense of masculinity. Like, what is masculinity? Kind of like, to me, the idea of speaking truth to me really feels to be a part of masculinity, to be able to stand for something, to be able to stand for truth, for justice, the idea of the fight, you could say. I think traditionally those kind of attributes like decisiveness, being able to endure suffering in a way of carrying a lot of burdens, pushing through, being selfless in that. And that kind of like the men going to war. It's kind of like the stereotype, I guess, or was kind of like the manifestation of that in ancient times. And that's why I feel like speaking truth, in a sense, has a relation to that. It's of course very different than being in a field knowing somebody could chop your arm off, but it does need a form of courage, especially in our kind of social media age where there's a lot of negative influences on our, or kind of you could say that our weaknesses in our psychology are being amplified by the technology, like fear of being rejected, power of the social norm, which is being distorted by social media. The idea of the social norm is like completely different from what it is in the real world. It just looks different online. So yeah, I'm just kind of on this quest of I think eradicating fear, my heart, and becoming more masculine, being a leader to my family, being able to bear things as the head of the family, being able to give direction and vision of where I think the family should go, how our kids should be raised. And it's not like my wife does not have a say in that at all, but I feel as the man, God has given the man responsibility to be like the first initiator of that, to be, as what the Bible says, be the head of the family. So the image that the Bible paints is of a man having a sacrificial life, of laying his life down for his wife, laying his down for his family, basically saying like, you're the last to get what you need, like to bear the burdens, to be able to, you could say, if there's anything coming at the family, whether that's emotional, spiritual, physical, that the man should be there on the front line to defend his family. So to provide, to defend, to protect, to build something. The images often used are like the priest and the king. The priest and the king in your home. Be the king in the sense of rule well over your domain. Make sure there's order in the family, that everybody gets what they need, everybody's you could say is also placed in their right role. Their gifts are acknowledged, that they can flourish, that your wife can flourish, that she feels she has what she needs, that she's emotionally safe, that you can give that environment. So be a king. Where are you going in your life, like financially? Where are you going to live? What is our family going to stand for? What's going to be like the imprint, the spirit of our family, so to say? And then the other side is more to be the priest or the teacher, you could say, the pastor. Also, the family is the spiritual side. Like it talks about washing your wife with the waters of the Word, of leading her again and again to her Maker, her real number one, her real, you could say, her real ultimate head. And so the man is called to be a spiritual leader. So that's talking about having vision for values and what type of people do we want to be as a family. How specifically are we as a family going to manifest God? Like, what is our calling, our mission? What are our spiritual giftings, you could say? So you see in our society there's been an assault on masculinity for a while now. It's kind of amplified in the last 5 years, 5 to 10 years. Well, how long has it been? But it's been going on for a while. And you see it both in the church as in the world, that basically those type of masculine traits have been described as toxic. And of course, to be fair, to play devil's advocate, to give the devil his due, there has been forms of toxic masculinity. But what is toxic masculinity? That's like somebody going so into a competitive spirit that he's completely demeaning and belittling the people around him. Somebody who just uses his strength to push away the weak. I'd say somebody who's not humble and arrogant and is not grateful or humble about how to use his power. He uses his strength for himself and not for others. He uses his strength to destroy and not to build. I'd say that is a general description of what should rightly be called toxic masculinity. But this has extended to where everything remotely masculine is automatically toxic. Like the phrase, this is also a racial thing, but the phrase white men. Like how much do they want that conjures up this image of disgust and just anger, the white man. It's like worse than cursing at somebody almost, like so, and it's almost like they assume you have that as well, right? Like, and still, I'm a biracial person. I get somewhere what they try to say, but it's such an unfair and racist statement to make, like, because in a lot of the Western world, we're predominant, like the majority has been white people, so almost automatically most of the leadership positions are also white people, and very often white men. This makes it seem like white men is this unified group, while the guys dangling at the bottom committing suicide or being pushed into war, or the people on working like 2-3 jobs to keep their family afloat, those are also white men. But nobody thinks about that when you think about white men. You think about that one rich guy that's ruling the world, right? Like that's deciding everything for everybody. Which is like this minuscule percentage of actual men, especially white men. Which just makes it ridiculous. But you see this push. This is like that. That's more like, I would say, the explicit attack on masculinities, and then by using the phrase toxic masculinity and mansplaining. How I hate that term. How I hate that term. Like, instead of, like, it's kind of the same as with kind of the increasing racism in the groups that say they are against racism, right? Like, it's that you are actually, instead of saying somebody's a douchebag by not letting me finish, he doesn't know a lot about the subject, but he's trying to be smart ass anyway, well, everybody can see that he's not. Instead of just saying he's a douchebag, you have to connect it to him being a man, which is like so bizarre, right? Like, I mean, we can do the same for women. There's a lot of toxic behaviors that we could connect to women, and I guess in some sense we always have in a society, right? Like, so the mansplaining is like, to me, because of kind of like the trend and the kind of like the toxic discourse in that movement, you get like, oh yeah, okay, come on, like you get kind of frustrated with that. But in a way, in a society, we've always done this in a healthy way with humor, right? Like, look, so the male stereotypes and the female stereotypes that come back in almost every comedian show, we laugh at them because we know they're kind of true. Are they true for 100% of the men or 100% of women? Probably not, but they're true enough for everybody to instinctively laugh at them, like, right, the typical things of men and women, right? Like, so yeah, I think, to me, just I think more the more general kind of, you could say, general kind of attack on masculinity has been more subtle in that sense of like portraying men as idiots. I think is like something that's been going on for a long time. Think about The Simpsons. Think about what's that show, like with Peter Griffin and Stewie. You know it, Family Guy. Yeah, that, and not just Family Guy. Like, think about I think about the series that when I grew up. What's that guy? The Love and Marriage. The Al Bundy with his. Oh, was it Al Bundy? Ted Bundy? Al Bundy? I don't know. I'm mixing up. I think a crazy serial killer with a character Al Bundy, I believe. Anyway, the guy, hand in his pants. The dad's on the couch, lazy, only looking at the TV. You know, like is a noodle of a man basically, right? Like the woman rules the household. So this image of like the incompetent, basically useless man that's just hanging around on the couch and still somehow can call the shots around the house. That's kind of the image of men that has been proliferated. Is that the right word? A lot. This is kind of like you kind of internalize that, you know, like so that is how they see us as men, right? Like so Homer Simpson, you know, the idiot drunk, basically, stupid Peter Griffin, same. And this does something to a generation, right? Like, okay, still, it wasn't as harmful because in the 80s, the 90s, you still had the other end of the spectrum, which is like the badass guy, like the James Bond, you know, Rambo, Sylvester Stallone, and all kinds of, in every Sylvester Stallone movie, Arnold Schwarzenegger in every Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, and yeah, Bruce Willis. The 80s and 90s kind of action heroes, they always kind of portrayed that stereotype of like I'd say so, in some sense an ideal masculinity, in the sense that courageous, fights for justice, stoic in the sense that doesn't let his emotions take complete control of him, remains in control, fights for the good guys, you know, stands up for the weak, stuff like that, you know. Also, of course, James Bond, also womanizer, cocky, arrogant, you know, like there's these other sides as well, but now it feels like just slowly, ever so slowly, and especially like it's escalated, it's just like there's no more positive male role models, and everything, anyone who's almost remotely masculine gets attacked as being toxic. This makes it really hard for young men to know what they can be. And I think like when the Me Too movement happened, that was a shock to me, like to actually see how many women are victim to this. And I was like, what in the world? Like, how is this happening? Like, how is this happening? And why is this happening? I think the main reason why a lot of this is happening, sure, men need to be raised in a way that they don't need to respect women. But you can assume that there will always be people, always be men, that will abuse that power. So what this really, to me, is a bigger failure of, it's like, we can talk about the Me Too movement. There's a lot to talk about there. But I think a core aspect that I want to focus on is that the good men were not standing up. The good men were not fighting. The good men were not protecting. Why? Because also they have not been taught that anymore. Not only that, they've been attacked basically for having any type of what was used to call chivalry, like holding a door open, like doing these basic kind of servitude actions towards women. That's like, oh, you think I can't open my own door? You think I can't pay for my own? Like, that's kind of been like attacked, and to a point where men are no longer raised with the idea that they should pursue these virtues of being self-sacrificial, of being the protector, of being standing up against evil, because we'll talk about that in a minute. Like, you could say the masculization of women has kind of been like, oh, no, I can protect myself. Well, I'll do all these things. I don't need a man, and all that type of stuff. And combined with like these role models of like doofuses, as little young men become doofuses, like stuck in video games and trying to find that competence somewhere else. You know, like if it's really sad, and it also has to do with stuff like, I think, with education system, especially primary school, a lot of women as teachers. And women will just teach in a different way than, especially young boys, are quickly perceived as being violent or being distracted, or like, while if a man would be in front of that class, they would have a really very different perspective of that male behavior. And I think we have those differences because God intended them to be like that. That's why I think God intended for people to have a mom and a dad, because moms tend to gravitate more towards nurturing, and dads tend to gravitate more towards discipline and I guess maybe like rough play and stuff. So to me, it's just like the one glaring thing in the Me Too movement was kind of like this weird conflict, where on the one side you have the feminist movement saying like, no, we don't need men and go away, and then the other hand is like, But you do. You do. What should have happened is good men standing up to those bad men. That's what should have happened. And so it's not an excuse just because, like, feminist people say it, the men should not have abdicated their responsibility. But you can see how a generation is groomed to become noodles. And I kind of see that kind of fear in myself as well. I think I talked about that a little bit. And I now want to kind of force myself to cultivate something else. And then you kind of run into the problem of, I was reading that book, I think I shared about this again, Fathered by God. And I love what he shared about that as men grow and mature through different phases of life and different things that are asked of them, you're not just growing into them, you are initiated into them. And talks about the role, the importance of having a mentor. And I think just seeing that in society at large, but also, like, I think for most people, like, this becomes like a vicious cycle of men becoming less masculine, raising their sons to be less masculine because they don't know what it is. Nobody initiated them, and nobody's initiating them, and, well, it kind of continues to get to a point where there's so few male role models that you feel like, I want to emulate that. When I was a kid, I didn't really have any idols anyone to really look up to, I think, other than Michael Jordan, lately. And in that sense, he was a good role model in the sense of hard work, perseverance, not backing down, so being fearless. Unfortunately, also a little bit of the looking down on your opponent and humiliating people. But there was at least part of what he demonstrated through his life that was, I think, a good role model for all people, but especially for men to emulate. And I think now you see with the rise of Jordan Peterson, I don't know if I already shared this, but this, like, I think it's super beautiful to see, but the things he is saying are actually so simple. Simple in the sense of, like, this is what we have been saying to men for thousands of years. And all of a sudden, there are a couple generations, like, when it stopped, and you see, like, men become absolute shells of themselves. And I think with all the consequences, like I said, they don't stand up for justice anymore. They don't fight, which means they won't protect the weak and innocent. And no matter how much the feminists don't want to hear it, women are the weaker sex physically. Like, there's a reason why we have, even within men's fighting competitions, have weight classes. It matters how much weight you pull them. Men just have more. Yeah, men are just stronger, just in general. Right? Like, the average man is a lot stronger than the average woman. And I think also the danger is because we have not taught men to protect, they'll use their strength to destroy in some sense. Well, like, you also, like, it's interesting to see, like, all the great wars, great not as in good, but, like, the big wars, or the wars that we've been able to, also, like in the Second World War, for example, that's, like, fought off the back of men mostly. It's not that the women didn't do anything and they were an important part of keeping the economy running and all that stuff, but on the front lines, it's just a bunch of men getting shot, right? Like, dying, fighting for something. And I feel like not having anything to fight anymore is like one of those things that really starts to sap that masculinity. Then you have the combination of everybody, the whole society saying, when you actually would put your mind to something and use your strength, that is bad and you're going to damage something. So young men are being raised with this idea of being destructive forces, and there's nobody telling them that they could be an immense force for good. Such a horrible kind of predicament. But the weird thing is, this is the bizarre thing to me, it's not just that masculinity and masculine traits are demonized, but they are actually glorified as long as a woman is manifesting them. This is like one of the most bizarre things I think that has happened, is that most of Western women are being taught to be extremely masculine. Like, so all the things they are basically discouraging young men to do, or saying like, oh yeah, well, that's that typical masculinity. Oh, you want to go dominate everything. You want to, like, that's basically what women are being taught. Go fight, go get a career, be the best, crush them. Don't think about all these, all the other people are thinking. You can make it for yourself. Like, it's typically kind of almost like an army kind of, what do you call it, like an army slogan thing. Like, yeah, come on, let's do this. And so the weird, this is like the absolute weird thing is that, so men have become more feminized, I would say. Women have become more masculine, and neither one wants that. Like, men don't want masculine women, and women don't want feminized men, right? Like, so we're in this super weird spot. It's super weird, right? It's just super, super weird. It's super weird to see. I mean, I do agree, like, in a sense that I think the feminine side of men, because everybody has feminine and masculine side, of course. The feminine side of men was, I think, hugely underdeveloped for most men, and it probably still is for a lot of men. To be able to share weakness and, kind of like that, to be compassionate, like, I think hopefully there's been some progress in that, although I don't feel like it's been that tremendous, because I feel like the emotional side that's kind of been has been fed in men is the victim mindset, and not like a healthy emotional sharing. And if you get angry victim mindset men, then you get school shootings. I think that's what you get. Like, again, if a man is not inspired, challenged, almost forced, you could say, duty bound, like place duty on his shoulders, you should be this. You should take on this hard task and go fight it, conquer it, go take it on. So the pursuit of virtue is so weird, like it's completely changed from just our culture has just completely kind of expelled that you should be a virtuous person. I think it's hard to say that both men and which sex has become more ugly for the lack of it, because we are both quite messed up now. But for men, I think maybe it's a bit more obvious the damage they could do if they do not pursue virtue. Like I say, if a man doesn't use his strength to build, he's going to use it to destroy, in some sense, either his own life or somebody else. Yeah, man, and it's like, I'm kind of just so frustrated with it, because you see like the success of Jordan Peterson is, I've said that often, it's kind of like an embarrassment to the church, to me, because what he's doing is basically an old guy is telling you what you should be doing, which is in a very, very, very general sense, at least one of the key parts that roles that the church should have played. Young man, this is what you should be doing with your life, right? Like, because he's saying basic stuff, but he's like basically saying yield yourself to virtue, right? Like patience, hard work, don't be a victim, clean up your own life, try to take on responsibility, and as you grow, try to take on more responsibility, try to be, in that sense, a blessing and a support to others. Face the suffering of life you got with courage, speak truth. These are all kind of Christian principles, and it's kind of sad that, I mean, I'm happy that it's happening, don't get me wrong, but as a Christian, from a Christian perspective, it's really sad that the church has not been the entity to do that, right? Like, I see him kind of like as a secular prophet in that sense. Like, I do feel like God is using him, even though he's clearly not a Christian, but God is still using, right? Like, you have this scripture in the Bible about God uses the foolish things in the world to shame the wise. Well, this one is definitely for the church, the same with church, I think. He's an old psychologist. I mean, he's smart. Like, I'm not saying he's like some doofus or anything, but like, he's smart, and he's embodying what he's preaching. Like, he's telling truth, he's taking risk, he's courageous in that sense. He's not a typical like macho, muscular guy, but in a sense, I think that's better, because more people can relate to him. He's not like some super physical specimen. He's just a man who embraces his duty, in a sense, and embraces his calling, and is courageous, and dares to speak out and that stuff. Like, so that is what we need more of. And I do see there as like a counter movement, right? Like, of men kind of trying to re-emphasize masculinity. Not all of them are as healthy as they could be. Some are, in a sense, getting back to that toxic masculinity maybe. But society needs it. And I think the missing part is not just, let's talk about the church in a minute, but like, we don't just need men to return to masculinity. We need women to return to femininity as well. Like, I think that's the other side of the scale. I mean, again, just like you said, the femininity of the feminine side of men. Hope you can still hear me with all the banging in the background. Feminine side of men was underdeveloped, and maybe in some sense the masculine side of women was underdeveloped, because for a long time in society they've kind of played like a, what do you call it? Like second grade, second class role. They were limited in a lot of senses. So in that sense, maybe it was good that women also could develop that a bit more. But now it's like gone off to the extreme where, again, both men and women are not being taught what it means to be a man, what it means to be a woman. And a lot of other cultures do still have that. You're being raised also with a focus on family. I think that's, like I say, the distortion in having feminine men and masculine women is like just a disaster for the dating world. And you see it nowadays. Why can't women find any guy, or men have kind of given up on finding a woman because of this, because of all these masculine women and these feminine men. Like, men don't have those traits that women are looking for, except for like the top dogs that are banging everybody, because they have all these women flocking towards them. And all these women are becoming super masculine in the sense that men are like, yeah, sorry, I'm not looking for that. I'm not sort of looking for a super intelligent, high career performer in my life. Like, I'm sick of work. When I'm at work, I don't want to be reminded of that stuff. Like, why would we be focusing on this shit at home? Like, what I want when I get home is I want a nurturing spirit, in the sense of like the strength, the power. In some sense, like they say, like a woman is looking for a dad and the man is looking for his mom. In some sense, you're looking for that feminine touch in your life. You're looking, like the male world is competitive. It's competing. It's harsh. I think a lot of women don't really understand that when they kind of criticize the male. Like when they criticize kind of like the business world, like, yeah, I'm not being, nobody's pulling me ahead. Well, ask the guy at the bottom how he feels. You're just comparing yourself to the top guy and not to the lowest guy, right? Like, I mean, men know what that is. Men know what that feels like. That you feel like you're waltzed out, or you're being crushed, or you're being, you can't compete with all the guys. The difference is that for men, their identity is often way more attached to that than it is for women. You still see that for women, inescapably, their beauty, their elegance is their main hierarchy. You still see that. Like, even though they want to deny it, just see the behavior of women on their photos of their friends and men. Like, men are saying like, oh, it looked like you took a shit. And the women are like, oh, amazing, beautiful, oh, awesome, yeah, you're so amazing, you're so intelligent, you're so... Like this, there's still just this different way, these different values that we kind of intrinsically value, and people can say that is all society, shaped by society, which I think that's... If it's in every frickin' culture in the history of the world, I think you can kind of give up on the idea that this is just a fabricated thing. There is something inherent in us, in our psychology, our biology, in our spirits, I believe, that gravitates to these certain things. And it might manifest differently in cultures, but it's like the beauty standard shifts, like from being chubby with small breasts, like in all those paintings, to having very fair skin, to having darker skin, to having a huge butt, to having a small butt, to being skin, whatever it is. Like, the beauty standard can shift in the sense of what is perceived as the most beautiful thing, but what it's still beauty, right? Like for women, like you don't really see that for men, although you did have that weird, looked at with the white wigs kind of period when you could say the feminization of men was at an all-time high. But I think, so there's an ideological fight behind this, right? Like, so why is it that we see women becoming more masculine, and there's an extreme push and like cheer for women to become masculine, and why is there this attack on men's masculinity, and in some sense a push to feminize them or emasculate them? And it has to do with kind of like this like what's somewhere deep behind the gender ideology as well. This is the idea that society is just determining all these differences, right? Like, so the only reason why men and women are just exactly the same, the only reason we have these differences is sexism. That's all. And we need to correct them by kind of forcing the cross match, so to say. Like, let's get women to do more male stuff, and we'll... And it's kind of like, I feel like the deeper idea behind it, that you see that some people, I guess, have this internal belief that we're just, a tabula rasa, we're just this blank slate, and everything's just being filled in by outside sources, right? Like by environment and by society. And I'm sure, I mean, society has an impact. I mean, you can't escape that. But to me, that's just like the people who thought of this never had kids. You could see that because you can see way early on how kids manifest. Like kids have personalities and like the way they express themselves and what they gravitate towards. Like very early on, before they are brainwashed by the propaganda and society, right? Like, I mean, yeah, it's to me. Let's go to the church side. What makes me kind of not angry, but kind of like, I guess, disappointed. What I see, so I come from a Protestant branch. I would say probably somewhere in the Netherlands is different than in the States. So it's what we call evangelicals in the Netherlands is, I feel, different what they are in the States. Evangelicals, I would say, in the Netherlands are somewhere between Reformed and Pentecostal. So they often do have more like the more expressive side. You could say that the Pentecostals have. Often do believe in some sense in the gifts of the Spirit, but maybe not as explicit or overt as you see in the Pentecostal churches. And the doctrine is often, at least where I came from, my branch was kind of like, had like this Reformed kind of influence in the sense of like Calvinistic kind of influence a bit. Kind of in between there. But what I see among a lot of the Protestant branches, so, and I think more for the more charismatic you go, if you could say like you have Reformed on the one side, and then you go more Pentecostal charismatic on the other side, you see that in the more charismatic churches, also like the Hillsongs, the Elevation Church, and those type of churches, kind of like the more, kind of like the popular, the churches that are really focusing on, in a sense, reaching the culture with the culture, right? Like they try, their philosophy is kind of like, we are here, we're not of the world, but we are, I think, yeah, sometimes that's, again, the criticism. Let's not go into that side, but they at least try to reach the people with contemporary music, right? Like a focus on God is here, God is now, God is here, God loves you, kind of like very open and welcoming, and get the sinners in the church and let them kind of warm up to God, and then they will come to God. That's kind of like the philosophy you see a lot. What you see there you see that Christianity has feminized a lot. Like, in those branches of Christianity, you could say the feminine side of God is emphasized, or I would even say overemphasized, right? Like so that's God's grace, that's God's love. God is your father, he's your daddy, he wants to hug you, he's going to be your friend, everything's going to be okay. Like for the very kind of gentle, nurturing side of God is overemphasized. What you see in the more Reformed, more the stricter Christian, there's often more traditional, more liturgical. You see often the masculine qualities of God are being more emphasized. Like God is the judge, God is righteous, God is holy, God fights for his people. Like you fear God, kind of like that. The more typical kind of male side, the disciplined side of God, you could say, instead of the nurturing side of God, is emphasized more. So what I come from, that other branch of Christianity, mostly, I would say predominantly. So I see in the church, among men, you have like the toxic nice man, of which I was probably a part. Maybe still am. I don't know. I'm working. Which is like that, because there is this overemphasis on these feminine sides of God, especially for men, it feels like if God wants me to be like him, Jesus is the Son of God, he's the manifestation of God, we should be like him, we're predestined to be like him. If you only emphasize that side, so you feel like, oh, I should be this soft, lovey-dovey guy that's hugging everybody and smiling and everything, right? Like, and just takes it, and just takes abuse, and just smiles back, kind of like. So you get that toxic white Christian man, I would say. And the funny thing is, he's toxic not because he's masculine, he's toxic because he's feminine. He's too feminine. Right? Like, he's not masculine enough. So it's like the reverse this is toxic masculinity. This is real toxic masculinity. Like the man who is not masculine enough. So you get the Mr. Nice Guy instead of being the good, like I said about, instead of being a good guy. And it just completely kind of brushes over or ignores or just underemphasizes all these parts of Jesus that are completely different from that. That say stuff like, you are children of your father the devil, or him making a whip, and beating people out of the temple. Or just walking up to people, like looking for a confrontation and saying stuff like, what about these traditions? Are you like, he just starts and confronts them, right? Like, or he says like, woe to you, this town, right, like it will be worse for you on the day of judgment than Sodom and Gomorrah, which was like the staple for worst town in the history of man, right? Like in like one of the, you just say Sodom and Gomorrah and you're like, bad. And he says like it will be worse on the days of judgment for them. Like he says, he's like confronting people. He's like confronting injustice. He's confronting hypocrisy, religious hypocrisy. He is physically smacking people out of the temple because he feels like they are violating God. They are violating the temple of God, right? Like he's a tough guy, man, and he says tough stuff even against like his closest disciples. He would just confront them and say to Peter stuff like, "Get behind me, Satan," when he says something that is from a wrong spirit. He's not like, "Well, Peter, what you said right there. Come here, buddy." You know, like, that's not what Jesus is doing. You know, he's like, "Get behind me, Satan, for you do not have the things of God in mind." Right? Like, so it's like, oh wow. So, shall we keep walking, Peter? You know, like he's like awkward. You think, you know, but Jesus is like, he don't care. He doesn't care about the opinion of people. You can see that so strongly. Like, he's not doing that for them. He's not doing that for. He's like, I'm only doing it for His glory. Like, I'm doing this for His honor, for His, and not any of you. And that is what men really need, right? Like, they really need to be strong in themselves in such a sense that they are not kiss-ass people, you know. And I think, especially also in the Christian world, in a Christian dating world, this has, I think, been a problem kind of like for a lot of women because they feel like not really drawn to any of these guys. Like they're all, hi, what do they call them? Simping. Well, it's funny when I saw that word. That was such a funny, great word. Whoever thought of that, that's a great one. Simping, simps. And I think it's because, so I like it. I think it's because we are not emphasizing the masculine side of God. I mean, this has a host of other troubles in Christianity, not just noodle men, but like just that people have an unfair or an unrealistic view of what Christianity is or demands or asks of you. What is the road of Jesus? Why does he say it's narrow and only few will find it? And if you do not take up your cross and die daily, you cannot be my disciple. Like Jesus was very forward in saying, like, think about this. He's basically, we are like, if anybody just wants to say the Jesus prayer, just trick him into it. Like, just make him say it and we'll save him, you know, like. And Jesus was really like, well, as these parables are like, if you want to build a tower, and you better make sure you have enough resources to finish the tower. Otherwise, you're going to look like a fool when you can't build it. It's basically like, you sure you want to follow me? Well, just think about it. Be really sure. Yeah, and that's like, to me, so that's, again, the church, I think the church has just become influenced by the world in that sense, because that non-confrontational, like, don't hurt my feelings, kind of like that, seeped into the church. And the other side of the church is like the opposite. It's going to like, has backfired against that so much, is like, no, we got to speak truth. Shing, draw thy sword. You know, just start cutting at people. This is a sin, and that's a sin. You're a heretic. And like, this infighting about heresy, like that's so crazy. Like sometimes, like, there's such a thing as heresy. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like some things need to be called out, but like some, like the heresy hunters online, these people are like, I believe Jesus would say to you, you do not know what spirit you're of. Different subject. Maybe we'll go into one day. But anyway, masculinity. For myself, I felt I was one of those nice guys and burned out twice. So I feel my body's saying something about no more Mr. Nice Guy. Or at least in a sense, I mean, I'm not saying like kindness is still a fruit, gentleness, kindness, meekness, like there's still fruits of the Spirit, but I love meek. That's an interesting word, like how it's we often read meek like weak, right? But meek is like to be able to, it's something like, I thought it when I looked at that word, it's like something like knowing when to show strength, like knowing, like, so being just and righteous and knowing when to be mild and when to be strong. And that's, I think, such a beautiful virtue for men. That's like the virtue for men. Like, don't unnecessarily destroy stuff, but know when you need to be strong to push things back. Like, hey, stop this, or like to step in. So yeah, masculinity, man. It's just so sad. I have such a kind of hunger and a heart for young men when I just see what they're being fed, the shit in popular music and popular culture, and when social media is reinforcing. And again, it's the same for women, right? Like, so the men are being taught to be masculine in a wrong way, or not being masculine at all, being like either one. So you get often the very extreme kind of Andrew Tate. kind of side, or the noodle, right? Like the Ted Bundy, Al Bundy. You might actually be more masculine than most of men right now, right? Like, and we need to inspire young men to be something. All that with the Me Too and men doing all that messed up stuff and men not standing up to the messed up men, that was bad. But we can't just say, don't be this, don't be this, don't be this. We need to have something that they can be. And that is to be missing and lacking. And again, there's voices that are doing that, like a Jordan Peterson, I feel like doing that. There's more voices out there. And they're immensely successful because men are starving for this. I mean, not just, again, it's broader than men because women are also feeling purposeless, without purpose. But with men, it's so simple. You just got to tell men to do something hard and encourage them that they're capable to do it. That's basically it. And have that be a good goal. Yield yourself to that. And we need to get back to, instead of forcing people to pursue goals, to pursue career, to pursue stuff or like just achievements, you have to push people to be a certain way. You have to get the pursuit of virtue back, because everything is, otherwise people will turn toxic. Because if that goal, whatever it is, making a career or making 100,000 a year or 200,000 or whatever, 6 figures, 7 figures, all that stuff, building a business, all these things can be good goals. I'm not saying they're bad, but if they are the main thing, you know what you're going to get. Anything to get that. And you need to have this higher power. You need to have this higher thing that you yield to. That's why I think believing in God is so important, why we're made for that, why we need that, because we'll yield to something, but we'll just don't define it. We don't know. You don't know. If you don't believe in God, you are yielding to some standard. You're yielding to something. It's probably your own selfishness and your narcissism, but it might be something more virtuous than that. Luckily, there's people that do yield to a virtue, but it's not concrete to them. And if you don't have this fixed thing that you can yield to, when you'll be shaken by life, and you will be, when you'll be tempted to do that the right way or the cheat way, it's very hard. If again your highest virtue is just making that thing, if your identity is I need to be that person that makes 6 figures or whatever, but if you yield to becoming a virtuous person, if that is the highest goal, then becoming a virtuous person can manifest in that goal. For example, if you want to be disciplined, right? Like have self-control. Like go have this goal of having a 6-figure business. You're going to need a lot of self-control. You're going to need a lot of discipline and perseverance and pushing through. But right, like other virtues like gentleness and meekness and love, patience, joy, all these things, not all of them, right? Like not all of them are automatic when you go pursue those goals. So if you yield to those, let me just say that you can pick whatever other goal, but these things will make you, like the image of God in all those areas, whether you're a baker or a lawyer or a cop or a teacher, however you are, wherever you are, you will be a force for good. And then it almost doesn't matter what you pick, right? Like you could be like a janitor at a school and be like a father figure to lots of people, right? Like, I mean, if you have that heart, if you have the yielding to those virtues. So, well, anyway, let's look at time. I really feel like it's, in a way it's simple and in a way it's hard, like, because it starts in the family, of course, right? Like, I mean, to have a father who embraces his masculine side, to live that out for you, and even if he doesn't, and just to see him pursuing it, and he challenging his son, teaching his son, like, you are strong, and your strong will either hurt or you can build up. And then don't focus all the time on the hurt. Focus on that he can build. Focus on that he can make something. With his words, he can inspire instead of bully somebody in his class. He can make somebody, he can raise somebody up instead of crush somebody, right? Like, that's why I like sports, because a lot of these virtues come back in a successful sport team, right? Like, but then shortly, before my alarm goes again and the video turns off, the feminine side, like maybe I can't go into this also because I'm not a woman, but there needs also be a balance there. Like, first of all, women need to just know if you're super masculine as a woman, you are not attractive to men at all. There are some non-self-control men that just bang anything that walks. If you look beautiful, beautiful body, beautiful face, men will still have sex with you. But that's something different from men wanting to start a life with you. And this is also the toxic, if we talk about toxic femininity, the toxic shit that they're feeding women is basically, we start criticizing women are being made into objects, sexualized. And now in the female empowerment movement, what are we doing? Even more. Like, well, we're like saying here, go sexualize yourself on Instagram. Go objectify yourself on Instagram. I'm like, how can we not see that the sexualization, the objectification of women is way worse now than it ever has been in this empowering phase? Who is on top of this empowering philosophy? Sure, some rich white guy. Like, especially with these artists, like, man, you can see it with, like, for the biggest, the best. I mean, Beyonce, like, look, all of basically the big feminine stars, especially now, are uber sexualized objects. Right? Like, and we are teaching young women that this is the thing to pursue. That throwing your tits out there is somehow empowering. This is like so. This is so clearly thought of by a man. Because it's like, you know what would be really empowering? Hide out of your pants, Johnny. If you would take your clothes off of your own will, how about that? It's just so. It's like the arrogant guy flexing his muscles, like the stupid jock. That's like the feminine version of that, throwing your tits out. Like, just go appeal to the base instincts of any and every man, and then think that that attention that you receive is somehow says something about you. That's like, man, like even a chimp would run at you, right? Like, I mean, like this is the stupid stuff. It's like, and it's so counterintuitive for women that want, which you often see, again, in the stereotypes, men often desire that sexual intimacy more with a woman, and women desire emotional intimacy. And like, hey, you're sexually intimate with a man, can open up his heart, I'm definitely not saying that's happening every time, so don't throw your pussy at everybody. And for women, it's often the other way around. They need to be emotionally opened up, and then they want to give themselves sexually, or intimately with their bodies. So it's absolutely stupid. So stupid. I can get angry about this, that we have taught women to go offer yourself sexually at men. Because this removes, that was like one of the systems we had in society that forced men to be virtuous. You couldn't just get sexual intimacy with a woman. You had to go through her brother, older brothers, and her father, and they, as men, know you. They know you. They can see right through your ass. They can see you're a weak noodle, say, you better go get a job and man up before you can get close to my girl. And women, because men crave female attention, women crave male attention. You let women just go out and find male attention, they'll find that, they'll bypass that barrier that enforced men to be virtuous, to be strong, to be mature before they can handle a lady. And you're just saying, go sleep with me. You don't have to see me, you don't have to acknowledge me, you don't have to be good, you don't have to do any of these good versions, you don't have to be a good man. That's basically what you're saying. And women are thinking, or society's feeding them like, that will just make men better. No, they won't. And especially you giving in like that, in the male mind, whether you like it or not, whether you think it's fair or not, your value has just dropped. Because a man desires a woman that wants him, just like a woman desires a man that wants her. But the moment you offer yourself quickly to a man, that translates itself to, that was easy. How many other men has she done that with? So how likely is it that a woman will keep being loyal to me? Not likely. That's why they always like, that's why they're, this of course, like, it's unfortunate. They sleep with the slut and they marry the saint. That's what they do, right? Like, that's what men do. And it's so, this world has taught women that somehow getting a man to be sexually interested in you is somehow a good thing. Like I said, this is the most base thing. You can almost get any man to be sexually interested in you, especially because we have thrown the virtues out the window. Because this is a bad thing about men as well. You should be virtuous. You should not go sleep with everyone. I think men should be just as sexually, what do you call it, like prudent. Like, I think you should be a virgin when you get married, both men and women. I think that's better for both. And that's a whole other story. We can talk about that another time. But Now it's just such a reverse. Like, so women are being taught basically to destroy their own image in the eyes of men by being sexually promiscuous, what we used to call a slut. And I know people don't like that word, but it used to just be a description of certain behavior. And then people started doing that behavior more and more and didn't like the description anymore. Can't have your cake and eat it too. I know people don't like that. But I think what has happened in that department is that you used to call a woman who is sexually promiscuous, has sex outside of marriage, without being paid for it, without being a prostitute, she's just having sex with multiple men. We used to refer to that as a slut. The problem is that in the male world, this same behavior was not vilified as much, even glorified among some men. Again, for me, from a Christian perspective, that's sexual immorality and that's sexual immorality. They're both wrong. That there is this sub-masculine culture, a huge masculine culture, that is actually glorifying that, I think that's wrong. But I think the problem is, we had this moral standard for women. Don't sleep around before marriage, and when you do, oh, they call them a slut. We should have the same moral standard for men. That moral standard plummeted, and men were not being called out on that shit by other men, and just by society in general, to enforce, basically, to have, promote, you could say, a monogamous culture. But what we did, instead of trying to raise the level for the men, we just said, like, well, we'll just plummet this one for the women as well, so everybody's a slut. Men are sluts, women are sluts now. And it's like, it's doing so much damage. Like I say, it's teaching men to be immature. And what's happening now, especially with the dating apps, it's just a handful of men getting all the women because they are the top of the pie. All the women think, oh, can I get that man? Offer themselves up like cheap candy. And these guys treat them like cheap candy. That's the messed up thing. Like, and then it enforces this thing in all these women. Oh, men are just the worst. Yeah, these handful of men that you are enabling, yes, they are the worst, yeah. And this would, again, if you would, if you would revert to these old virtues, these true virtues of women and men both being chaste, both saving yourself for marriage, that forced men to become real men before they could marry. They would be grilled by the man, by the father, by the brothers. You had to get a hold of your vices, become a virtuous man, at least prove that you could be able to sustain a family, that you're emotionally stable, all those type of things. And for a woman, for her, it meant that also, I guess, in a sense, she had to work at herself to be able to be a good partner herself. That's also what you kind of see now in this masculine women. You're like, you know what I offer? I have a great job, and I'm very intelligent, and I'm very ambitious. I don't give a shit. We got to run this house, woman, together. Like, I mean, we got to just... That's to be like, I want a mother for my children. Right? Like, so that's to me, like, also as a man, I was thinking like we can talk about that as well, why men and women don't want to have children anymore, but I'm looking for a mother for my children. I'm looking for a woman that's going to take care of me in the sense of like, I'm looking for that feminine energy that I don't have out in the world. I'm out there, masculine energy. You're in the world competing, trying to do your thing. And when you come home, you don't want more masculine energy. And then the battery was gone. So where were we? When you get home, as a man, you don't want more masculine energy at home. You're looking for a feminine touch. You're looking for that nurturing spirit. Like I said, like it feels like men are drawing towards, in a sense, their mother's embrace, and men are looking for their father. Women are looking for their father in some sense. But that's what a man desires. And like I said, we gotta run the house. Like you, as a woman, you gotta show that you have what it takes to run a house as well. Right? Like a man needs to show that he can do everything to run. It doesn't just only have to be work, like to be like very old school stereotypical models. The man only works and doesn't do anything in the home, and the woman only does things in the home. Like you can have a balance, but now it feels like these women are just not prepared to run anything at all. Like, I mean, are you going to be a good mother? Are you going to be able to run a household? Right? Like, and I think what was so important about I think what's so messed up now, like why I think, again, marriage should be the place for sex, because it's the most intimate, intimate manifestation, physical manifestation that you can have together as a couple. So it's weird to have the most intimate physical manifestation with each other while you don't have the most intimate emotional commitment. You don't have that emotional commitment towards each other, and you might not even have the spiritual, are we going at the same direction? Do we have the same values? Are we going the same thing together? So, and that's why I think it's so damaging, because we see with sex, like hormones are being released, attachment hormones. Every time you're just breaking up, you're just making yourself incapable of having long-term relationships. Like, I think it should be like, the zipper should be like, first, look at the spiritual side, like look at the spiritual side of things. Do we both have the same morals? Do we both have the same values? Are we going to the same thing? And that's why I think what I said is more important to pursue virtues than pursue abstract goals. Because think about it as a couple. If your highest goal is to make career as some kind of, I don't want to talk, I really feel like how we've been brainwashed into thinking that a career is the most important manifestation of your identity is just great for capitalism. Let's call it that. You've been tricked into paying taxes. If your goal is that, and somebody else's goal is also some career, and then all of a sudden I have to move across the country or to another country to continue my career, then, well, there we go. But if your goal is not some kind of physical manifestation in the world, but it's a virtue goal, like I'm going to yield to the path of God, or I'm going to yield to these virtues in my life, then you know you're going to end up together at the end, because you can still grow and develop, but the chance that you are going to be going in the same direction is like way bigger if you say that is my life goal. My life goal is not to do this something, but to become a certain someone. And if you can both have that goal to become a certain someone, then you can both, iron sharpens iron, help each other become that goal. And however that manifests, in whatever job, in whatever hobby, in whatever context, community, or whatever, that's then the second part. That's like, that will not stand in the way. That will not be the highest manifestation that will come above this, right? Like, so it's not be like, well, I wanted to be a lawyer, so goodbye. Yeah, I think that's so important. I think so. That's to me like the first zipper. And then the second part to me is that emotional side, and that's to me why it's so important that women see that getting a man to be sexually interested in you is nothing. You should not have that as a chocolate, like, yeah, victory. Like, if you lay down on the street with your legs spread, there will be some crazy ass dude that'll dip it. Like, it's messed up. That's the messed up part of men. But it's true. Like, you see it in popular culture. All these women like, I can get any man to sleep with you. Yeah, but he won't marry you. He won't settle down with you. You know why? Because you can get any man to sleep with you. And it's so weird and destructive how this has become a virtue almost that women are pursuing. Like, this idea, I can get any man. Like, no, you can't. You can get any man to sleep with you, which is like the Red Bull, the Toro. If you're just going to probe a man for a sexual desire, that is such a strong drive in men. Like, so strong. Like I said, the old system where you have to be virtuous, or at least, I'm not saying all guys that got married were virtuous in the past, but the idea of that system was that there at least is some check to show that you're a real man, that you're mature before you get even close to this woman. That desire also, like, I can only be sexually intimate with a woman and with her when I get married with her. That should definitely not be the only reason to get married to somebody. But that strong drive could complement, hopefully, the virtuous drive just to be virtuous, to mature, to be strong, and to prove yourself worthy as a man, so you get the woman. Like, now what happens, that energy is just being let loose. Like, if you just have these skinny, skimpy ass dresses with your tits out and your ass out, that man does not see you. He does not see you at all. Nothing of you. Nothing of who you are is what he sees. All he does, you just kind of like, you're prodding that base primal instinct, and you're just going to see, it's just going to be a bull who sees red. And that's what you want? Is that what you want? Like, I sure hope not. Is that an accomplishment? To basically have this zombie just pound away at you, and then like, well, yeah, another guy wants me. And it's so sad because women often, men you see have that very strong desire for sexual intimacy, for physical intimacy. And women often have that strong desire for emotional intimacy. And what you usually see, if a woman feels emotionally safe, she feels open to sexual intimacy. And with men, it's often the other way around. Like they either, because they can't get the old system, they have to open up emotionally. They have to connect to that woman in a different way and then get the sexual intimacy. Or the sexual intimacy, a woman in a right situation, not some guy just plowing away while he's half drunk, will also open a man up emotionally. Being sexually intimate with his woman and then being there, that will often open up the heart of a man to share more, like if he is already committed to you. So to me, like to the ladies, it's like, if you like, again, the old school method, it was like, you're not going to have any of this before we marry, before you can emotionally commit to me, right? Like, I think that was such a powerful, I think that's the way God meant it, because then you first have, hopefully, like I said, the spiritual zipper, the first step, like, are we even going in the same direction? Are we looking at life the same way? Do we have the same values? Are we going to sacrifice for the same things in life? Are we going to yield our lives to the same things? So like, what is the thing that is higher than our relationship that I can call you out on? That I can say, hey, this was the higher goal that we were pursuing, right? That's the most important. Then the second is the emotional part. And if you as a woman, again, dress yourself up, but you can dress up, but cover up. Like, just be dignified. Because trust me, just by virtue of being a woman, you will have sexual appeal to a man. That sexual side, that's covered. You don't need your tits out. You don't need your ass out. That's sexual. Just by being a woman, especially being a dignified woman, that's even more attractive because you're a woman. You're not a slut. You're a woman. You present yourself as a person and not as a sexual object. If you present yourself as a sexual object, that's all you're going to get. But if you present yourself as a woman, as a person, as here am I, then that man, again, just by virtue of being a woman, you will be attractive. Especially if this guy is spending time with you, he's attracted to you. If a guy is spending time and money on you, he wants something from you. And now you got to grill him to make sure that it's not just that he wants to pound away at something. So by forcing that, like by saying like this whole stuff, until you emotionally commit to me, that's not on the table. That means that the man, kind of like you could say the emotional, the bull that's seeing red, that's going down. Again, it's still there. Otherwise, he wouldn't be there in the room with you. He wouldn't be there spending money on a dinner or a date or spending time with you, even if he's not spending money. If a guy's spending consistent time on you, he likes you. That's a rule. And so when you have there is that the man is forced to engage with you, not in that sexual race, but in an emotional way. And that is often a language that men are not often speaking, especially not among other men. If you have a good group of friends, you are hopefully able to share your life and your burdens with your guys that have brothers around you. But it's at least a language like for women, since they were young, they've been trained in this language. Like because women gravitate more to persons, to people, to talk about people than about stuff, and just the psychological makeup, slight biological hormonal differences, they just talk about interactions, like people interactions, way more. So they train this skill. It's a skill, right? Like, and they learn it, like when they're young, very often. Again, this is a generalization, but for most women, it's like that. Most men don't have that, and if they don't have sisters at home, they have nothing of that. They have no idea what the female mind is like. They have no idea what the female world is like, right? Like, again, generalizing. And by him having the force to be forced to engage with you in that emotional way, that also, you can also see, again, that piece of emotional intimacy that women are looking for. You are forcing this man to step out on that area. So that also is a sign of trust, because it's often a weakened area of the man. It's easier to be like the cool guy, the tough, like flaunt your money, or like show that you're strong, but now to show that you're vulnerable, if you can see that in a man, that's a very powerful thing to find in a partner. So if that is the case, then hopefully if that blossoms and you're like, I want to commit emotionally to you, then you have the I commit to you to, is that the second zipper, so to say. And then you have the sexual intimacy, again, in the context of after the commitment. Marriage is that commitment, not living in each other's home. That's a rental. Because you're still kind of like, am I going to open up completely, or is this thing going to scare him off? Well, maybe we'll wait another year and another year. And actually that behavior leads to more broken relationships and leads to less trust in the relationship, and less trust in a relationship leads to less successful relationships. That's why you see that people who often live together and they get married, they get divorced quicker, or a higher percentage than people who don't. But so again, the second zipper, get that emotional commitment. When you marry, you also create that emotional safety, I think both for men and women, but especially for women, that this man's not going anywhere. The back door's closed. Like, to treat marriage like real marriage, not like, we'll have a party. But like, no, I commit to you. The back door is closed. I am here. I'm going to yield my life for your good. If you have that, both for men and women, it creates that safe space. Also for men, where they can be vulnerable, right? Like, because men are terrified of being vulnerable. Also because women shit on it, like sometimes, right? Like a lot of men maybe have been hurt like that. But to create that safe space for the both of you, and then the sexual intimacy, again, with the hormones, there's actually something happening physically that connects you. It's like this is the top of the zipper. It's like the cherry on the cake, you know, like on the top. It's not the cherry. Like, it becomes like the glue, right? Like, because now actually physically your body is telling you even more than you've already done. Like, are we spiritually on the same page, same direction? I commit to you. My will. I use my will. I'm going to be with you. Then your body's firing these hormones, these attachment hormones, to actually seal and empower actually a thing. And that's why sex in a marriage is often like a sense like the glue, in a sense, like by yielding to each other again in all those different areas. Your body is actually created by God to make it easier to connect to somebody. So if you go sleep around with a bunch of people, you are destroying that natural sense of your body that'll help you connect and stick and yield to somebody and really serve somebody and really love somebody. So yeah, a lot to talk about, man. But like, so both the men and women, like I said, I think that's a part of masculinity and femininity as well. Like, if men can focus on being good men and women can focus on being good women, oh yeah, that's another part. Women, stop taking advice from other women. Like, this is the stupidest thing. You see some 33-year-old, 35-year-old woman, clearly narcissistic, tits out, ass out. Oh, you don't need this and you don't need that, and you don't need a man to this, but you don't need all that. Just look at her life. Do you want that life? Just think about, like, where do I want to end up 10 to 20 years from now? Look at what type of family you would want, for example, assuming you want to have a family, or what type of relationship you want to have. Look at those couples. Those are not those people. Those people are going to end up alone. That's simply what it is. You're going to give your body away in your prime, in your 20s and 30s, and you're going to build this whole masculinity, a whole masculine character, which is often the embodiment of toxic masculinity for some reason. And then expect that a man desires that. Like, why? Why would a man desire that? Why? I'm not saying it's hopeless. You can always, again, close the cookie jar, be a good person, and men are looking for feminine women, and women are looking for masculine men. So men, get your shit together, and say no to all that pussy floating around. If you're one of the top guys that can maybe easily get that, it's also not healthy for you. You're training yourself to treat women a certain way, look at women a certain way. You're foregoing that, I think, that challenge of perseverance, of self-control definitely, but also just the way you see women, man. Like, it's good for neither, and for women as well. Just yield yourself to a pursuit of virtue. Embrace femininity, embrace elegance, nurture your nurturing side. That doesn't mean you can't have any masculine qualities at all, just like a man should have some feminine qualities. But if that balance returns, and especially if we can figure out in the dating world to have more of that social responsibility kind of, just like you used to have, don't go and offer like the most prize in the eyes of a man. Don't offer the most prized possession on the first, second date. Like, I just don't. You have removed all incentive for this man to prove that he's worthy of you. You have removed every incentive. And like I said, in his mind, fair or unfair, your value has just plummeted. Your value has just dropped, even if just a notch, right? Like, again, generalizing. Not saying, but this is like what we see happening in like most of the world. Like, why men are not even getting women anymore. Like, most men are just not engaging with women anymore at all, because social media is driving everything to the top guys that are just banging all the women and giving everybody a negative perspective of what the man is like. So as a woman, you should just wise up. Like, if again, if there's a one thing from my sisters out there that I want you to get, is that don't use your sexuality, your sex drive as a way to get the men in, because you will get men. You'll fish. You'll find something, but you probably won't find a man that you want to grow old with. You won't find a husband. You won't find a real man. Yeah, we live in everything's distorted, but hey, baby steps, I guess. I guess that's all I wanted to rant about. Yep.